Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, the debate was underway last evening, and it started with a question from the audience directed towards Madam Clinton, seeking to delve into identity politics. Apparently, this lady was a teacher, or at least that was the question that Hillary Clinton had for her, and it seemed as though this was completely scripted. Of course, that comes as no shocking surprise. The Democrats have always played that kind of game when it comes to the arena of American politics. And it's really disgusting when you stop and think about it that in the parlance of American politics of the current era, that we are just stuck with that sort of thing, where it's always going to be about identity politics, where they're focusing on penultimate concerns, and where it really does not play out for the interests that really matter to the American people. It's this sort of pandering, I think, that drives a lot of people away from politics. I mean, who wants to hear over and over again the whining of, oh, because of who I am, I'm discriminated against, when in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. The United States of America is one of the most, if not arguably the most egalitarian nations on the face of God's green earth. We've had our battles. We've had long drawn out just problems in the past, but we've overcome them. And that's the thing. That's the thing that they don't want to address. They don't want to address that we've made any progress, or they will give it just lip service and then explain that they need to turn to the centralized government to have even greater control, and that we have to give disparate treatment to certain people. But as we have oftentimes reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, folks, the whole intention of the United States of America being based off of those natural law tenets are a nation of laws and not of men. And this is something that I think gets swept under the rug, and I certainly believe that the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media have been complicit with this. They have been allowing this to move forward. They have been basically fueling it. They've been fanning the flames, stoking the fire of racial animus and discontentment in this nation. But at the other aspect of this is the fact that the so-called alternative right, or alt-right, has come forth and basically said that nationalism needs to be based off of this barbaric notion of tribalism, again ignoring the fact that the United States of America is based on laws. You see, equal protection under the law is an amazing thing. It goes to the root of who we are, both as a nation and as a people, and I believe that it's something that has been ignored for far too long. And I think that that is done willfully, intentionally, and purposefully. Again, to drive a wedge into the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, in order to weaken the nation as a whole. And that has been their modus operandi for well over a century and a half now, and it's coming to a breaking point. I think after these two disastrous terms of this Barack Hussein Obama regime, that the American people are getting very sick and tired of repeatedly being told just how wrong we are, how wicked we are, and how there is always this blame America first crowd that seems to have gotten their claws into the body politique of the United States. And how often are we going to be chastised for past past grievances? How long are we going to be held in the past? It's funny because I always say that conservatives are the ones that are clinging to the past, that we look towards the Constitution as if it is some sort of perfection. And really, what we're doing is living in some time period that's 200 plus years past. But it's malarkey, it's rubbish. Because if you stop and think about it, they're the ones that are acting as though the issue of slavery is still paramount, even though the institution has been gone since the ratification of the 13th Amendment. And that issue has been taken care of, and nobody from that time period is still alive. But you see, that's what they do. They play into this game of identity politics, and it was at the very beginning of this debate. Clinton started her answer by saying that she wanted to be president for every American. Now that gave me reason to pause and chuckle. I mean, I could not look at that and listen to that with a straight face because it's a bald-faced lie. She is not about representing every American. She is about representing her own self-interest. In fact, I would go so far as to say she doesn't really want to represent the American people. She just wants to have the awesome amount of unfettered power that the presidency has become. Again, ignoring the fact that pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution that lays out the proper role, scope, duty, and obligation of the federal government, but in particular the presidency in that one, that the presidency is something that it was never intended to be. And I think that's part of what has made this such a heated and contentious election cycle, unlike any other within living memory. It's because we have allowed it to become a popularity contest as we have allowed that office to divorce itself so far from the scripture of the Constitution that it's unrecognizable. It would be unrecognizable to our founding fathers. They would be shocked and appalled with the direction that this nation has taken. And I think we have to pause and consider that for a moment, folks. What I have seen and what I feel has been grossly lacking in this 2016 presidential election cycle is the fact that we're not even really discussing the Constitution. We're not talking about restraining the president. We're not talking about curtailing the overzealous draconian measures of the federal government, which is impeding the American people, which is diametrically opposed to the foundational basis of the United States. Instead, we have two leftists going in front of the cameras there at Washington University and proclaiming, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, me, I. But that's not how our nation was designed. Because if you recall, during the long and drawn-out bloody affair that was known as the American War of Independence, our founding fathers were rebelling and revolting against the centralized power and authority of the British Crown and Parliament. We were given what was known as virtual representation, but that doesn't cut it because it really doesn't allow us to have any say, and that is where that whole notion of no taxation without representation comes from. And that's what our founding fathers were concerned with. And unfortunately, we've fallen into that pattern again. And this 2016 election cycle proves just how far we have fallen from the guiding light of federalism. That is the proper order of power between the several states and the central federal government. And it's all linked back to the natural law tenets, which is life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and then what you find in the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to our shared United States Constitution. And therefore, what should be the paramount concern and the paramount talking point in these debates is the Constitution. Yet I didn't really hear it get mentioned in any meaningful fashion during this debate. If you were hoping for restraint in government, and a return to fiscal responsibility and proper relationships between the several states and the federal government, you just wasted 2+ hours of your time. But that's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have done this for you. So you don't have to go and listen to that monotonous drivel, and you can spare your brain cells from being destroyed by the utter nonsense and tomfoolery that went on at the debate. So here's the thing. When Hillary says that she wanted to be president for every American, I just don't think she's being serious about that, because she's engaging in this nonsense of identity politics. We've seen how identity politics has been poisoning the societal fabric and framework of these United States of America because of the Black Lives Matters organization, the police shootings. All of this is showing that we are at a boiling point, a breaking point, for lack of a better term, and these tensions are just ratcheting up. And the Democrats are pandering to it. But it's not just the Democrats who are pandering to it, because Trump then responded to Hillary by saying that he agrees with everything she just said. Now, I thought that he was going to clean crooked Hillary's clock. I mean, that's what the Lion Branch Trumpidians from their Trumpidian tabernacle have been preaching from the altar, that he would always just be able to trounce her. But I don't believe that was the case. That is certainly not what I saw in that debate. He then said that we need to have more government programs to help inner city black kids and Latinos. Again, saying that there needs to be special treatment. Again, ignoring this whole notion that the United States of America is a nation of laws and not of men. That, too, just brings up all sorts of problems for me. It does not relate to what we are, either as a nation or as a people, and it is just pandering to this sort of identity politics that really that is a misnomer. It's divisional politics. It's breaking the nation up into segments and making these segments or factions compete against one another. And again, that brings me to what George Washington had warned about in his farewell address, that if we broke into disparate competing factions, we would lose the overarching image and message of the Constitution and our government. That of being a nation of laws, based on the natural law tenets that were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. That is the danger that we have, and I think we've fallen into it. And it's something we cannot escape. But for Trump to pander to that and to play along with those lines, it churned my stomach. Just as I'm sure it turned the stomach of the vast majority of you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. Because when you stop and think about it, he is giving credit or credence to groups like Black Lives Matters, saying there is this sort of systemic racism that they've complained about. Remember that Obama said that racism is an inherent part of the DNA of the United States of America. It's nonsense. It's sheer and utter nonsense. The problem I have with this is that nonsense of identity politics is really beginning to dominate us. It is really beginning to control who we are, both as a nation and as a people, and it means that the message of the Constitution and the message of self-empowerment through the doctrines of self-responsibility and self-accountability, working in tandem or in unison to give us self-determination, is no longer there. It's no longer discussed. It's no longer considered relevant. And I think the media has certainly been one of the top pushers or advocates of fundamentally and irreparably changing the message so that we're off point, so that we're distracted by these things that are not true ultimate concerns and are instead penultimate concerns that are being wielded as a weapon to divide and conquer. But it's not going away. And in fact, I think it's getting worse. But then we see that the moderators were chomping at the bit to go after the idiotic statements that Trump made with respect to women and that tape that was recorded back in 2005. Now, I've already done a solo flight special that discussed that in detail, so I'm not going to delve very deeply into what was said there. But what Trump did say there was shocking. Shocking in a sense that it shows just what little constraint he has. Yes, what he said was what he likes to play as just playful banter, that it was just locker room discussion, but it's more than that. If you know that you're about to be on a set filming, why would you go out and say such stupid things? Why would you say such stupid things to begin with? But the thing is, it plays directly into that false narrative and that false perception of the just specious Republican war on women and minorities, blah, 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 blah. It plays into that. And they are going to make political hay out of it. Just as my first officer, Jeremy Grabenton, and I have predicted ever since last year that once he clinched the nomination, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media would turn their backs on him, and it would become a proverbial bloodbath. And that is what we are seeing. It is a proverbial bloodbath. And it's not something that I think plays well for the American people. Because again, it shows us that there are so many fissures and divisions that are striking at the hearts, souls, and minds of the American people, and it essentially becomes bread and circuses. Now, what does that mean? Well, bread and circuses comes out of the dying days of the Roman Empire. Their infrastructure was failing. The emperors were unable to feed the people other than through the games. And so what they would do is they would have bread, oftentimes augmented with sawdust, and free entertainment, just to keep the plebeians, or the people, from being able to rise up in armed insurrection against the official power of the government. And that's kind of what this is. We are not in our halcyon days, but I still think that we have bright days ahead of us, so long as we go back to strict adherence to the clear and concise language and the fundamental tenets contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. But the problem is now that nobody of either of the two mainstay political parties is really committed to that. They don't care. It's like they're having an orgy up there in Washington, D.C. of governmental spending, lack of fiscal responsibility, and false promises and perceptions. And again, I think that once again plays out to our great detriment. And so we have to be able to bring in some sanity, and unfortunately, that was not what I was seeing there on the debate stage. You know, it's a trap that the media set for Trump, and he fell into it. Hillary then said one of our lines from Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that America is already great, meaning that America never once truly ceased being great. So that shallow, hollow, empty, and meaningless platitude that has been his campaign slogan was falling flat. And it allowed her also to go forth and say that we still needed greater diversity. But this is insane. No one is literally treated differently under the law, which is what equality means. It's equal opportunity as opposed to equal outcome. But Hillary is trying to make it equal outcome. And unfortunately, I got that sort of feeling from Donald Trump as well, although it did seem as though his talking points came from another source, that this wasn't just his usual drivel. But still, he was not coming across as all that effectual to me. But Trump tried to say that Hillary said the same words when she was running for the Senate for the state of New York. And then he spoke about her insincerities once again and doubled down on the issue of identity politics, saying that we needed more programs for inner city children. Why? Why not say, look, The problem that we have is an out of control, illegitimate, rogue, and tyrannical federal government that is, through its draconian policies, inhibiting all children, and that it has literally hampered our system of education in year after successive year. No, he dropped the ball on this occasion. He dropped the ball. I think that once again would make any dyed in the wool constitutional compositionist feel queasy inside, because it shows that the man who is the head of the ticket doesn't seem to know what in the hell he's talking about. And I think that, again, just does not bode well for us. The election, folks, is just right around the corner, and he still has not given us any reason to believe that he has the proper character and characteristics to be commander-in-chief and top dog, if you will, of the United States. But it's not just top dog, because the president is still subject to the same laws that we are. But the way that he spoke in 2005 and the way that Hillary has been acting in her 30-plus years in politics shows us that they think that they are above the law. And certainly the way things have fallen into place throughout this year and last year, we see that that is the case. That is the problem. They literally believe that they are above the law, and the way that the law has been playing out, it's been acting like it. But Trump was then interrupted by the moderator and tapped into his Dr. Ben, I'm a victim, get me a new suit, Carson, to whine about the time. This is not the sort of characteristic that I find presidential. In fact, I thought that was one of his glaring weaknesses, among many, during this debate. And it's shocking. It's shocking and abhorrent that that is the case that we find right now, but it is what has been delivered to us. And it's tragic, really. They then turned to questions from social media and asked Trump whether he had changed with respect to his demeanor towards women, and he reiterated the locker talk excuse. But making things even worse, because as you are well aware, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have declared war on the twin cancerous doctrines of political correctness and moral relativism. Trump tried to go into moral relativism by trying to deflect the attention to his own social foibles onto former President Bill Clinton. But here's the deal. Bill Clinton's not running for office. We are here to measure the character of those candidates who are currently, today, in 2016, vying for the highest office in the land. And so this sort of obfuscation just does not do us any favors. It does not help us. It does not lead us to the path of prosperity. Instead, it continues the sort of reality television program thing too. Folks, our country and our proper tenets of government are far more important than being entertained. But why is it? Why is it that we are back on that notion of it being cheap entertainment? It's because that's all Trump knows. He's a brand man. That's it. It's about branding. And Hillary is just able to sit back there and skate around on the issue. She doesn't have to argue anything because he has already stuck his foot in his mouth so many times that he entered this debate from a defensive position. He was already put on the defense, and that came across as weak and feckless. I hate to say it, but that was the initial impression that I was left with. But he then tried to say that Hillary should be ashamed of herself after he used the victims, like Paula Jones and some of the others, of her past misdeeds to grandstand. He used them for political brownie points. Now, folks, we condemn the left for that, and we damn sure are going to condemn anyone who does that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and what Trump was doing there, I thought, was highly intellectually disingenuous. But that's par for the course with this fiasco of a presidential election year. Because 2016 is not shaping up to be a good year for conservatives. We've already said that our voice has essentially been stripped from us, and that is quite clear and was made very apparent on that debate stage at Washington University last evening. Hillary responded to Trump and said that he is free to run his campaign however he wants. And then she said that she was going to take the high road, trying to quote Michelle Obama there. Again, another little stupid trap that was laid forth that Trump just blundered his way into without any tact, without any strategy behind it. He was ill prepared. Again, he did not prepare for this debate, and it showed. It's sickening, really. Of course, this is exactly the strategy that Jeremy said that Madam Clinton would take during the debates. She doesn't have to talk about the issues because Trump has made such loathsome mistakes. Except I don't think it constitutes a mistake on his part. I think he is a plant, and the debate last night made it seem even more clear that this was what he was attempting to do. Clinton then also hit him on the lack of a meaningful apology to Judge Curiel, Captain Khan, and all the others. Trump then said that she should apologize for starting the birther thing, which he had mentioned earlier, but I'm not sure that this was effective because it was again deflecting. It came across as sour grapes. It was, gee, I'm sorry I got caught, but, my hands are smally and she's so crooked, perfect hair forever. But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It needs to be policy. She then hit him on the lack of his policies, to which he tried to say that she was unfair to Bernie Sanders, and again trying to pander to the Sanders voters who are socialists. Bernie Sanders was a self-avowed socialist, and I don't think we should be pandering to his voters. They're not going to come over, particularly when you consider that Trump is the archetype of everything that they claim is wrong with politics. And it's certainly not going to bring any comfort or solace to true constitutionalists, because they realize that those policies, as Alexis de Tocqueville had said, are nothing more than a new age form of feudalism. We don't need to go to a caste system. In fact, that sort of a system, as Thomas Paine said, is the most wicked type ever devised by the minds of mankind. By the minds of mankind. It literally is that way. And so we see that this kabuki theater, for lack of a better term, just kept playing, and Trump kept digging his hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And here's what I have to say with Trump trying to say that the Democrats rigged their own primary process. I don't care what the Democrats do unto themselves. That's something their party should deal with. We need to focus on issues. He then said he would demand a special prosecutor to investigate Hillary. The problem is that's up to Congress. Again, he shows that he doesn't understand the separation of powers. He was good to try and attack the email thing, but the way he delivered it was bad. And just trying to tie all these things together just doesn't work for me. It shows a lack of knowledge, a lack of true understanding about how the American system of polity works, and it really shouldn't be that difficult, folks. The Constitution lays it out in no uncertain terms as to how the government is to properly operate and how it is to orchestrate its position. And neither one of these candidates, again, spoke to that. Neither one of them went to just how important those things are. Instead, it was this phony baloney type of ad hominem attacks, red herrings, all sorts of logic fallacies and flaws, which is part of the problem with this style of debate. Because again, it's not a true form of debate. It's just the moderators trying to control a circus sideshow freak attraction that literally leaves America divided. Divided and without answers. In fact, I can't think of a worse position for the virtuous people, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this country, to be left in. And that I lay squarely at the feet of the moderators for not keeping it in control and for peddling an agenda instead of objectively asking questions that would push the envelope so that we could get the answers that are necessary to make informed decisions. And again, as we have so oftentimes reiterated, the only litmus test that matters, the only litmus test that we should be turning to, is the Constitution. And in failing to do so, it means that we are basing our decisions on penultimate concerns that ultimately leads to the problems facing this country growing in exponential fashion. I wish that weren't the case, but it is literally the case that we are facing. And again, it just is not playing out well for us at all. The audience then started to get involved, and the moderators snapped at them. This booing, this heckling, this catcalling, this applause. I'm sick and tired of it. Civil discourse has a place in the United States, but this was rigged in that sense. If they want to talk about rigging, it's that it's a two-card Monte game against the American people in which we, the American people, lose each and every time. And so it means that we really don't derive any value from these bizarre spectacles that they are terming as debates. No policy, nothing. But Hillary just went out on a limb there and said that it was so bad that they couldn't talk about issues because of Trump's attacking her and his mudslinging. Again, that was a trap. It was a trap, and Trump fell into it, and the gutless opposition party, or GOP, fell into it because they have not been standing for anything. You know, folks, the Republican Party used to stand for standing up for the Constitution, representing the Constitution, restraining government, in ensuring that the American people, who are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, were able to thrive and flourish so that our country could be robust. But I don't see that anymore. They don't stand for anything anymore. They didn't in 2008. They didn't in 2012. They didn't in 2014. And they damn sure don't in 2016. And so that means more of the same, repeatedly doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different outcomes or results, which is, as we have mentioned before, the clinical definition of insanity. There really is no other way to describe that. But this fiasco of a debate just leaves me with an empty feeling inside, because have we really fallen that much as a nation? Have we fallen to the point now that we no longer know who we are? Because that's certainly the feeling I got from it. And that's so unfortunate, because we are better than that. And we demand and deserve better than that. But anyway, the moderators then asked Clinton about her emails, which was briefly touched. She admitted it was a mistake, and this was intellectually disingenuous on her part. You don't mistakenly put things on a private email server when the rest of the government is required to meet the strict national security and top secrecy standards. What a load of bovine excrement, but she was allowed to get away with it, and because she had that blithering idiot next to her as her opponent, he really wasn't able to effectually respond to it or to hold her feet to the fire. He tried. I'll give him credit for that, but it was ham-handed. It came off like a caricature from some cartoon strip or a political cartoon that, again, it just shows that he is a cartoon. He's not a man, he's a cartoon. Trump said that it would implode in 17, meaning that the Obamacare system would, and that irrespective of the experience that Clinton was trying to flaunt in that opportunity after the email thing, that she would make it worse. Of course, she'd make it worse. But here's the thing. He showed that he once again focuses on the economy and debt, tailoring his answer only to the economy. But the economy is but a mere symptom of the overarching illness that is plaguing this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. It is buying the bait. It is going for that red herring as if it is the truth. Yes, it's bad for the economy. But where it's even worse is how it flagrantly violates the clear and concise language contained in the Constitution. And again, this was something that was woefully lacking from that debate arena last night. It's sickening. Then he said that we have to repeal and replace Obamacare. Why do we need to replace an unconstitutional law? I don't get that. But to his credit, he tried to say that he wasn't for universal health care, even though he always had been. Because if you recall what he said at that town hall during the primary process, when asked by CNN's Jake Tapper what the responsibilities of the government are, he said housing, health care, and education. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. But he did say that we should be able to trade it over state lines. But that is something he stole from Ted Cruz. And of course, he's not giving Ted Cruz any credit for that. So it's just once again par for the course of this man being the intellectually disingenuous buffoon, for lack of a better term, that he really is. And so I think it once again shows that he is acting in a way that is a great disservice to the American people. Why do we always find ourselves in these positions? It's because we have not been focusing on the things that matter. And I know that may sound like a repetitive talking point on today's program, but it's the honest to God's truth. We do not talk about what matters to the American people. That is our shared United States Constitution and allowing the people to be free to make their own decisions, to be self-determinate via self-accountability and self-responsibility working in conjunction, being dovetailed. And the problem with his statement back then, with housing, education, and healthcare being the main prerogative of government, is that that's not found anywhere in the Constitution. Recall again that based on our natural law tenets, or the natural order of things, the federal government is one that is by necessity limited. But what he's doing there is essentially blowing that up, turning that on its head, allowing the government to essentially come in and micromanage the facets of our daily lives. And everywhere we turn, anytime that happens, that is when you begin to see the unspeakable horror shows that have just been popping up from coast to coast and border to border in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. Now, I wish that wasn't the case, but it is the case. It is what was on full display in front of the mainstream media, and the American people must feel befuddled, or at least certainly bewildered with the way that the process has been going, because again, it is not reflecting who we are. It just isn't. Now, Hillary then tried to praise Medicare as a single-party payer system that helps the elderly. But Medicare is an unmitigated disaster. And this is what happens when we allow the government to have control where it was never meant to. Again, folks, what is the proper scope and application of government? The proper scope and application of government is outlined, detailed, and mandated by the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. And yet neither one of these candidates was speaking in any direct form or fashion to that point. And again, I think that works as a great disservice to the American people. Honesty must come to the forefront, and the truth always has a way of shining through. Its light always has a way of illuminating what is real. And it's as Aristotle said in his Art of Rhetoric, that people are hardwired, in a sense, I'm sort of paraphrasing there, to accept the truth. That we naturally go out and look for the truth because we know the truth is inherently the right answer. Therefore, all of this obfuscation or muddying of the truth and of the facts to try and push a political agenda and narrative come hell or high water just makes things worse. They go out and they complicate things, and that draws us back to what the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs had said in his magnus opus of Keynes at Harvard, that they, being the Fabian socialist leftists, will use just all of these twisted and diabolical words and catchphrases to try and change the traditional meanings of words in order to benefit themselves. And I think that plays out to where it's just bad. Just bad for all of us. Again, because it comes to a point where somebody has to realize that we are the ones that need to be responsible for our own liberties. That's why the opening lines to the preamble to the Constitution starts with, "We the people." We are the ones that established this government. We are the ones that created this government. And therefore, it is only we that can maintain it, and it's only we that can safeguard it. And again, that was simply not the message that I was hearing on that debate stage. It's why Jeremy and I have been so frustrated with this disastrous 2016 presidential election cycle, because it shows that we are not focused on who we are and what we stand for. And it bothers me. It bothers me because there is more to us than that. That we are a great nation. And that we can be even greater than what we have now if we tie it into the natural law tenets. But when that's not discussed, and when that's avoided, that is when we fall into the pitfalls and traps that the Fabians have set to essentially, drastically, fundamentally, and permanently change our form of government once and for all. But to what? What are they hoping to change it to? Certainly not what our founding fathers had envisioned for us, certainly not within the context of the nation itself. It's some Fabian socialist dystopia that is ugly and has no place in an open, honest, but above all, free society like that of the United States of America. It really does not have any place here. But it doesn't matter. That's just not the way it played out last night. We then see that Hillary tried to bring up religious tests with the plan to keep Muslims from being able to migrate into the United States. She then tried to say that what Trump has said is that, or rather, she tried to say what Trump was saying, his stance and position with respect to that, has been used to recruit new members into ISIS. Well, that may be the case, but I doubt it. It doesn't matter what ISIS says. This is nonsense. It's intellectually disingenuous, and I think they were both being intellectually disingenuous about it. And throughout that entire national security thing, she tried to say that Trump supported the war in Iraq. I think Trump didn't know what the hell he supported. Just as I still don't think he knows what the hell he supported, and it was obvious due to his woeful lack of preparation. And that's a pattern too, that we just can't ignore. We need to have a commander-in-chief who's prepared, willing to listen to the briefings, willing to be abreast of the knowledge of those things that are critical in the United States. But they don't. That's not what we've been getting. That's not what we've been seeing. But why? In this election cycle, above any other, that should have been the thing that we went back to. That should have been the thing that we returned to, because in so doing, we would begin to address the real slate of problems that are out there and could work to find practicable real-world solutions for them instead of just going off of this phony baloney type of he said, she said, schoolyard bully crap. Because that's what we have been left with. That is what has been on display. Again, it just conjures up images of a bad reality television program. Why? Are we not better than that, both as a nation and as a people? I am of the firm belief that we are. That we are, that we must be, and that we will be. But this election cycle, it just is so tiresome. It's so depressing to see that we have faltered and wavered and fallen so far away from the things that actually matter that this sort of nonsense has become the new normal in the American system of polity. Why? There is that nagging rhetorical question that keeps bubbling to the surface. Why? Well, it's because neither one of the two mainstay political parties wishes to focus on those issues that matter. None of them wish to have their power curtailed or restrained by the clear and concise language of the Constitution, and therefore they are all trying to run from it as quickly as they possibly can. But again, that is not in the best interests of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. Again, it draws us to the point of no return, in a sense, in so much as it allows the distractions to become center stage. Meanwhile, our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights and liberties are in more jeopardy and in more dire threat than they have been at any other time in living memory. I wish that weren't the case. I truly do. The moderators then tried to interrupt Trump, and it sure seemed that they were interrupting him more than her, but he also seemed to keep trying to interrupt her more. So it was kind of this just bizarre spectacle to see that unfurl on the debate stage. And again, it shows that decorum has broken down. And I know that we have decried this on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, but it bears true. Common discourse and civil discourse just seem to be gone. It's as though common courtesy has been cast by the wayside and replaced with identity politics and he said, she said, gotcha, grab you questions. Why? It does not serve a purpose other than to stoke the flames of derision and division and divisiveness. But in the end, does that serve us? Does it serve you? Does it serve me? Does it serve America? I think the answer to that rhetorical question is both open and obvious. It does not. It does not help us. It does not serve us. It does not work for our benefit. But I think what we have to do is delve a little bit into some of the exchanges that occurred during the debate and then kind of go from there. And so I'm going to pull one up here and see about just getting to the particular parts that I thought were important. It was just kind of interesting to see. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull that up now, and then we'll discuss it.
I have sat at that table in the Situation Room.
Nobody knows the system better than me. I
get health insurance through our employers. Got big benefits. Number one, insurance companies can't deny you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. Number two, no lifetime limits, which is a big deal if you have serious health problems. Number three, Women can't be charged more than men for our health insurance, which
There's that identity politics again, folks. There's that identity politics. It's annoying. It's very annoying. And then we need to see one of his responses just to give you an idea of what's going on. So here we go.
Keep your plan. The whole thing was a fraud, and it doesn't work. But when we get rid of those lines, you have competition, and we will be able to keep the existing. We'll also be able to help people that don't have money, because we are going to have people protected. And Republicans feel this way, believe it or not, and strongly this way. We're going to block grant into the states. We're going to block grant into Medicaid into the states so that we will be able to take care of people without the necessary funds to take care of themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
We now go to Gorba Hamid.
And then you see that they were doing the question things from the audience. I mean, folks, this just came off as a freak show. I really can think of no more apt way to describe it, or to define it, or to say what it was that we faced. It was a bad show. Something that goes against the things that we know to be right, that goes against the things that are necessary to allow the people to place this nation back onto the path to prosperity. Again, it was with the divisions of identity politics, and then it was with him going on with whatever nonsensical lack of train of thought that he has, just bubbling up to the surface. And so it did not leave me feeling secure at all. I'm not happy with the direction that this election's going, just as I am sure that the vast majority of you, our cherished listening audience members and passengers, are disappointed with the current trajectory of this election. Because again, it shows that conservatism doesn't have a voice. We have been pushed to the side, our voice has been stripped from us, and we have been silenced. Why? Because of the egotism of one particular person and the chicanery of the Democrats on the other side. So it's as though from either side, from all sides in this election cycle, we are being hammered, and the important things are not being considered. And at the first part of that soundbite, they had clips from the various stump-thumping speeches that both candidates delivered, and none of them sounded good to me. All of them sounded as though they were entrenching the position of expanded government at the expense of the rights and liberties and duties of the people. Now, the format of the debate was not useful either. And I know that I've harped on that because, again, it doesn't allow us to fully examine the candidates' positions. And the other thing was that there was no mention of the Constitution at all in any sort of a meaningful form or fashion. To me, it fully demonstrates that these two candidates aren't thinking about this in the constitutional framework at all. And I think that's a great disservice to the American people. This nation cannot operate, and its government cannot act except through the powers that are expressly enumerated within the Constitution. Of all issues, this should be the paramount one to the citizens of the United States. It's because the Constitution is what defines us and defends us from rogue and tyrannical governments. It's as though the very spirit or idea of the United States has been cast by the wayside, and we're waging a battle of popularity contests regarding the muck of identity politics. Again, obfuscating the truth, moving away from the things that truly matter, exposing us to this greater division and divisiveness. And it ultimately doesn't work for us at all. But that is the great lie of the media. It is the media that hypes this. It is the media that tries to make us believe that what they're saying will somehow come full circle to benefiting the people, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. Because it's important that we, the people, in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity to tell the government, no, you cannot take away my rights, and you cannot redefine me or my system of government. But that is what they have been doing. And they've been doing it in election cycle after successive election cycle, and the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has been collaborative with it. They haven't been mounting any meaningful resistance, save for a discrete few. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse, and Utah Senator Mike Lee all come to mind. They have been in the trenches. They have been getting their hands dirty. They have been out in the muck and carnage of this political battle, the culture war, for lack of a better term, and they have been standing up for us. But they've also been sabotaged by the detente wing of the gutless opposition party at each and every turn. So that the battles they're having to wage are not just against the opposition, but is also against those from the upper echelons of their own party. And then you have a man like Donald Trump, who has never once in his 70 years spent on God's green earth ever truly espoused a constitutional position, much less a conservative one. And he's able to waltz in and snatch up the reins of power within the party and to become the nominee, and then he goes out and does these stupid things that just leads to this deplorable state of affairs. It's shocking. It literally leaves me breathless and speechless, because it shows that we are falling away from the Constitution and allowing these charlatans, these hucksters, these carnival barkers, and snake oil salesmen to redefine us. But folks, we never gave them the power or the permission to redefine us, either as a nation or as a people. This is something that they have done on their own, and they have been doing it with carte blanche because nobody is literally standing up to them. And it also sheds light onto the so-called right-wing punditry and commentator. People like Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Michael Savage, Rush Limbaugh, and to a much lesser extent, Mark Levin. They abandoned conservatism. They left the message that they have been preaching for decade after successive decade on the table and just walked away from it for either ratings or because of their overarching fear of Hillary, or it is just anything. Why? Why is it that we do not come back to what matters, the Constitution? I think it's because we have allowed ourselves for far too long to be distracted. We have allowed ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security that we can live and let live, when, in fact, the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists are hell-bent on our complete and utter annihilation, both as a nation and as a people, and that is coming back to haunt us. It's coming back to be a thorn in our side, to inhibit us from making any real strides towards responsible and restrained government. And to my mind, that is perhaps the greatest travesty of this electoral process. Because, again, it drives that wedge in between us, and we cannot see the commonality of what it means to be an American citizen. There is no longer an approach to this that there is a greater good for the country. But there should at least be 70% of something that we could feel. But the problem is, it's been the gutless opposition party that has been willing to compromise anywhere and everywhere without any meaningful gain on their side. Why? Because they are afraid of public pressure and public perception. Now, I know that these false dichotomy type perceptions, these false narratives, oftentimes matter more in the arena of politics than the truth does, because of the way that the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media just goes out and obfuscates the truth. But there ought to be a way to overcome that. The Republicans should have by now figured out a way to wrest that narrative away from the media and to control it themselves. But they haven't. And they haven't because I think ultimately what it really boils down to is that they don't want to. They don't care. It's about their ability to just live high on the hog at the expense of we the people. Now, does that serve us? Does that work in our best interests? And the answer is no, it doesn't. But going back to the content of the debate itself, Trump said he would force the foreign nations to take back their illegal aliens. And I know it has been said before, but Trump cannot do these things by himself. Again, he comes across as an oligarch. He wants the United States of America to be transformed into some sort of an autocracy, a dictatorship, ignoring the clear separations of power of government, which our founding fathers included in there, not just for show, folks. It was there to defend us, to give us the ability to redress government to address the government or petition the government for a redress of grievances. In fact, that was so important that it was included in the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, or first 10 amendments to the Constitution. But again, it's not the sort of issue that they want to move forward with. It's not what they think is important. Instead, they just continue to embrace this drivel that works against us in every nook and cranny of the American system of polity, and that is what has disenfranchised huge swaths of the American electorate. And in a way, I can't blame them. I can't blame them, because when you look at what it is that we're facing, it is open and obvious, clear, and apparent to anyone who is observing this in any form of an objective fashion that those who are the political powers that be, in other words, those who currently wield the reins of political power, simply are not listening to the people. They think they have a better understanding of what would be best for us to manage our way of life, to maintain our standard of living, to maintain our quality of life, when in fact they have been so detached from it, so divorced for it, for such a lengthy period of time, that they don't even know how to relate to us. You see, that is the strain of populism that has bubbled to the surface in this fiasco of a 2016 presidential election cycle. Populism on both sides of the aisle became the narrative. It's just that the Democrats were willing to stomp out their populists, whereas the gutless opposition party, or GOP, was willing to burn all of their principles, all of their stances, all of their values to embrace this. And they have abandoned the nation and their constituents in the process. Again, that does not work for us. It does not. Hillary then tried to argue that the leadership of Lincoln showed how to work with Congress. Again, trying to point out that Trump doesn't want to work with Congress, that Trump wants to make it a one-man circus, a one-man show. And I think there is some point to that, some accuracy or validity to that point. But again, it shows that they're not focused on separation of powers, that they think Lincoln followed them. But Lincoln didn't. That was part of what led to the American Civil War. That is part of what caused the great divisions and divisiveness that haunted this nation for 5 bloody years. And recall that during the war between the states, we annihilated 2% of our population. 2% of the population. And yet, we are divided now more so than we were at any other point in our relatively brief yet illustrious history, save for 1860, the year before that bloody and destructive war began. And so here we are, with no effective response to it, no effective approach that I think will get the nation back onto the path of prosperity. And I think that means that we are swinging in limbo. Swinging in limbo, missing the opportunities to try and bring the narrative back to the idea of what the United States of America is. And that is not some far-fetched radical principle or position to hold. And if it is, then we're in good company, because it's the positions and views and arguments made by our founding fathers, who in their infinite wisdom and foresight gave us the longest contiguous or uninterrupted running constitutional document in the entire course of human events. They obviously did something right. They obviously knew something that worked. But now we, in our vainglory, seem to think that we can discard with that we know better than they did, and that we should embrace a failing system, that of Fabian socialism. It doesn't work. Socialism fails each and every place that it's tried. Spin, spin, spin the globe. And put your finger down on any nation that has tried to embrace socialism, and you will see that they are faltering in one form or facet. And again, it is because socialism disregards individual human dignity. It disregards the sovereign rights of the popular individual. Politics really is like a fabric. There is a social fabric, but what makes a fabric strong? What makes a thing hold solid form? It's the individual atoms or fibers or strains. It's individual. Standing in tandem, standing in union, but without recognizing the individual strength, you weaken the entire edifice of the nation. You weaken all that we stand for and represent. And when you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. That's the major calamity and catastrophe that was on full display there on that debate stage. I wish it weren't so, but it is. And so if we were to be asked who was the real loser in this debate, wasn't either one of the candidates. I wouldn't even say it's the political parties. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that it is we the people. We have the most to lose. And neither one of those candidates stood up for what matters to us. Neither one of them stood up for our principles and values, and that, to me, is a continuation of the overarching problem that ails and afflicts this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. There's no way around that. There's no way to sugarcoat or candycoat that, folks. Hillary then brought up the Russian concern. She claimed that Russians were directly attempting to influence the election in favor of Trump, and that Trump needs to release his tax returns. Again, because he was unwilling and continues to be unwilling to take the sting out of that, or to take the bite out of that argument, she is going to use that to bludgeon him to death. And he as always, fell back to his default position of saying that, well, I can't release it because I'm under a standard audit. Except that, as we have mentioned over and over again to the point of ad nauseum, that Richard Milhouse Nixon was able to release his while being under an audit. So again, it's a laughable, nonsensical excuse, and it shows me that I don't believe the man is serious about winning. And it's not just about winning, folks. That's the other detractor from this fiasco of 2016. It's that we are willing to sell principles just to win. We have been so hungry and hankering so much for victory that we are willing to abandon who we are and what we hold near and dear. Why? What good is winning an election when you lose the nation in the process? That's the dire question. That's the thing that's ignored. That's what the Lion Branch Trumpvidians congregating there in their Trumpvidian tabernacle have not been able to satisfactorily explain to me. I'm perfectly open-minded enough to hear a decent argument as to why we should support this man, or what would restrain this man, or why we are incorrect in our thinking. But that requires civil discourse. That requires approaching this from a rational, logical, and reasonable position, and that is not something that I have seen from any side since Trump clinched the nomination. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy of biblical proportions that we have fallen into this trap, and that we are once again being forced into this erroneous notion that this is somehow a binary choice. No, it's never binary, because you control whether you vote for them or not. And if they do not represent what you value, then they shouldn't get your vote. Why do we cheapen our voice? That's the other aspect that I think has come to the fruition, or come to the forefront in this election cycle. It's that there has been a lot of groupthink, to the point of where people are no longer willing or seemingly capable of thinking for themselves. It's this sort of sports mentality, this mobocracy, for lack of a better term, that has become the central focus of the entire American system of polity, when in fact that is not the way our nation was designed. In fact, the entire reason that we are a constitutionally endowed federalist representative Republican form of government is that our founding fathers wanted the people's rights to be protected. But that was not discussed. That was not even on the table. No, it was more fluff and nonsense, more of the same drivel, that same tired crap that we have heard reiterated to the point of meaninglessness. Now, Trump replied that Hillary was lying about him and said that Hillary was blaming Lincoln for the problems that are in the country. I don't really know what he was trying to say there. But then he tried to say that we ought to be good friends with Putin. Why on God's green earth would we want to associate with a nation who wants to see carnage and chaos reign supreme in our homeland? Do not think for an instant, for one iota, that the Russians are looking out for our interests. They never have, they never will. And the fact that we are seemingly incapable of seeing through that, and the fact that we want to emulate the autocracy of the Russian Federation in our federalist republic, speaks volumes with respect to the amount of drivel that has replaced common sense and decency, at least in the upper echelons of American politics. We have to think And we have to be proactive, and we must be vigilant in defending our liberties, and we don't do that by transforming ourselves into some sort of totalitarian autocracy. That is not who we are, nor is it who we should ever be, because this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. But where did we check out to? Where did we go? Where did we lose sight of that which matters? That which is of the utmost importance. We didn't get here overnight, folks. This has been an incremental process in which the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists have been steadily, relentlessly, and meticulously pushing us ever towards that precarious cliff to have us fall into the abyss of tyranny, bondage, oppression, and servitude. But we are not that people. That does not reflect the better angels of our nature. It does not reflect the rights that our founding fathers demanded that we safeguard so that it could be handed down to posterity. That doesn't just mean 200 years. That means until kingdom come. But again, neither one of the two mainstay political parties believes this. Neither one of them has accepted this as the viable position that they were putting forth, and that debate once again just proved it. Proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And of course, with this Russian thing, Trump said that he wanted to get along with Russia to go after ISIS. That's his excuse. He said he knows nothing about Russia and that he has no business there. But that's not true either, because Paul Manafort, who was the now ousted president of his campaign or director of his campaign, had all sorts of illicit ties to Russia. And there were attempts to build a Trump hotel there. So yes, he had business connections with Russia. And so what he said there was a bald-faced lie. And I'm getting rather sick and tired of these politicians, and yes, Trump is a politician, even by his own admission at the start of the debate, lying to us. Stop doing that. It's insulting, and it goes against the great weight of your office, or the office that you are seeking for yourself. Because again, it shows that they don't believe that we, the people, are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty. It's about them and their own self-aggrandizement at the great expense of we, the people. Well, enough is enough. I'm sick and tired of them obfuscating the truth. I'm sick and tired of them pushing for this position over and over again to the point of ad nauseum. Unless and until we begin to gain some control in this country again, these problems are going to boil over. And the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take to bring back a modicum of sanity to this government. And unfortunately, I don't see any signs of this improving within the foreseeable future. But for him to say that he doesn't know anything about Russia, well, then he tried to correct himself and say, well, I know about Russia, but I don't do business there. I sniff glue. I got smally hands. Well, it's just not true. Russian connections were there with Paul Manafort and with Trump's own business name. This is the sort of lying that kills me, because it's bald-faced. And no one is really pushing him on it. The fact that the tax issue is there, again, also shows that he should have released them earlier. He has harmed himself with this. And recall that he said that Mitt Romney lost because of the way that he handled his tax issue. It's nuts. It's nuts. The fact that all of this is there just shows that he's not taking it seriously. Now, a question from an audience member asked what would be done to make the wealthy pay their fair share. So once again, the moderators and the graduates of Pavlov School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media were trying to bring this back into class warfare, another pet favorite of the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. Trump suggested that we should get rid of carried over interest and to lower taxes from 35% to 15%. And then he said he was cutting it bigly. He used the word bigly again. Good Lord. For the middle class. It didn't answer the question, and he should have shown that the wealthy already pay more than a fair share in taxes, as we have a so-called progressive income tax system. He was right to say that our tax rates are among the highest in the world. The problem here is that he's still pushing to increase the size and scope of government exponentially. This cannot be allowed, as we don't have the resources for it. Neither one of these candidates spoke to fiscal responsibility. Clinton tried to say that we need to get rid of corporate loopholes. Instead of pointing to regulation, what we should be doing is empowering the free market. Why are we not focusing on the Constitution again? Folks, the answer to that question is that neither one of these candidates are for going back to the Constitution. They just aren't. It's not who they are. It's not what they believe. It's not what they advocate. Trump says that he understands the tax code better than anyone who has run for president. Maybe so. Maybe so. But what does that have to do with anything? We should be doing away with income taxes. And yes, that would require an amendment to phase out the 16th Amendment. It would be done in the same manner in how we got rid of the 18th Amendment, which was prohibition against the purchase of alcohol. The so-called Volstead Act that passed that, folks. And it was the 21st Amendment that repealed it. That's what we ought to do. We ought to have an amendment to repeal income tax, and we ought to go to a flat tax. But no, they don't want to do that. This, of course, was not discussed because I don't think Trump understands it, and Hillary doesn't want it. Then Clinton said she has been in favor of getting rid of carried interest for years. So I don't know why these people even go in front of the cameras. They're just going to change, just flip a coin and you'll get your answer. That's what this debate feels like. And again, it's the form and format of the damn thing, not serving the American people. And so it just, it's so frustrating. But then Trump kept interrupting Clinton during this point, saying she wasn't effective as senator, blah, 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 again, with the ad hominem personal attacks, which I think makes him come across as boorish, childish, and insecure. And what's really bad is it allowed Hillary to bring up the veto and once again act like she was working within the confines of the Constitution. Trump just fell into every trap. He doesn't think about this strategically. He doesn't even think about it tactfully. He doesn't prepare. He was woefully unprepared or ill-prepared for this. And I think that that was apparent through and through. And it was very difficult to sit there and watch it. Because anyone who's paid attention would know that how to answer that. The Constitution is really the best answer. It really is the best solution. And why do we not realize that? What is it that makes an entertainer so attractive that that is who we would rather turn to? That is who we would rather entrust with the reins of political power in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours than a true statesman? Again, it's the same trap and the same crap that we have seen come to the surface and the forefront in the arena of modern American politics over and over again. It's that we are more interested in instant gratification rather than hunkering down to put forth the real solutions that really would bring our nation back from the brink. We are the ones in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty that are tasked with doing that. We're the only ones that are endowed with the proper authority and wherewithal to do that, but again, it's as though we have forgotten it. And that's due, thanks in no small part, to this stranglehold of our institutions of education from coast and border to border that the historical revisionists and the Common Core standard bearers have pushed forth. And it's also because of the stranglehold that they have on the information media sources and outlets. And so they control the narrative. And it makes it exceptionally and exceedingly difficult when the counter media, this so-called right-wing media, sells its soul and doesn't stand for anything other than their own profit. This is a movement, folks. Constitutional compositionism, standing for the way that the Constitution was composed, going back to our time-honored values, traditions, and institutions, is a movement. It is not for ratings. It is not for money. But they don't realize that, or they do, and even worse, they just don't care. And I think it's more the latter rather than the former. And so this is why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have deemed this 2016 presidential election cycle the election cycle of betrayal. Because so many people, in fact, far too many people, are just so willing to go out on a limb here and abandon all that they hold near and dear. And for what? What do we gain from it? Right now, as I sit here, speak into this microphone, and convey this message unto you, I do not see anything of value coming from it. I only see detriment and only see deleterious consequences arising from it. That is why it is so important for us all to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of not only our shared United States Constitution, but also our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because without that, we have nothing. Truly nothing. It really is sickening. And then, with respect to Syria, Hillary said that she would use U.S. ground forces. Trump said that this was part of the stupidity of the current leadership being unwilling to fight, and I don't think either one of them gave a real or meaningful approach or response to it. And again, it just shows that they are reckless. They're reckless, and they're not forming a coherent path forward for the United States. Now, if you think that it's okay to go ahead and gamble with the future of the conservative movement, with the future of your fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, you can choose to exercise your vote for whomever. Either Donnie or Hillary or Johnny Watson and Jilly Steiny or Darrell Castle or that Hofling character. But I think what we really need to do is refocus our attention back onto the things that matter. Back to the Constitution. Spread knowledge and understanding with respect to the Constitution so that we are standing for something as opposed to against something. Every time that we fall into that trap where we don't stand for anything, then we fall for everything. And we've fallen for the biggest game of two-card Monte in the entire electoral history of these United States of America. That may sound harsh, but it is true. There is no denying it. And the fact that our entire electoral process has fallen into these sorts of bad times, I think speaks volumes about the current state of affairs in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. But so long as there are those among us who are willing to do the right thing and to stand up for the Constitution and never cease fighting for it and never abandon their principles or betray their values, then there is a fighting chance for liberty. But we are the vanguard of liberty, we the people. We must believe that we can bring this nation back to the path to prosperity. And again, it is only we the people who can. No one else can do that for us. Only we can do that. That is the message of empowerment that should have been on display at that debate, but was not. And that is the great calamity that is this 2016 presidential election cycle. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. Folks, she won't debate with you. She won't question your integrity. She's just there to pour alcohol for you. As always, folks, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Wright Flyer. I invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns you may have, either here at our YouTube page or our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. And on top of that, I invite you to follow us at Twitter with the Twitter handle at Radio Aviation EX. One more time, folks, that's at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, our Blogspot account where we're putting up audio-only versions of our state-of-the-art radio program, and then there is the Cafe Press account, which I'm also going to leave in the description here. Folks, every purchase you make helps us stay on the air a little bit longer to spread this knowledge of the Constitution and to empower you. Show your strength of character by sporting any of our attire with our original logo on it or our first-class passenger logo on it. We have hats, shoes, watches, clocks, neckties, tote bags, laptop protectors, phone protectors, you name it. We've got it at reasonable prices. It's all there. Go ahead and take a gander at that and give us a little bit of support, folks. We will see you again next time. Please do take care.